Architectural Outcast.
Let's talk about dueling interpretations. It's not uncommon to go on review sites like Rotten Tomatoes and have a situation where a TV show or a movie will receive one review from critics, but yet a very different review from general audiences. It's like the two groups have watched two completely different things. This attempt to control interpretation is not a new thing. It's as old as art. But interpretations are funny things. They're like assholes. Everyone has one, and they all stink but mine. We have three forms of interpretation. The first one is the artist's interpretation. And more often than not, the artist can't wait to run around to tell anybody and everybody who will bother to listen exactly what they were trying to say with any given work of art. And then you have individual interpretation. Everybody who comes into contact with any particular work of art will have their own unique take on what it's trying to say, their own interpretation. But if enough people share the same interpretation, think the art is saying the same thing, you start to form a consensus. This becomes a group interpretation. This is where the fun oftentimes begins. It makes sense that people who have a shared worldview, a shared background, will oftentimes have a common interpretation of any given work of art. It also makes sense that people from different backgrounds with different worldviews could have a very different interpretation of that same work of art. This is where the battles begin. Who has the right to make the interpretation? Who controls interpretation of art in general? And who should just shut up? In the last 1,000 years of Western civilization, we've only come up with two new mythologies, Robin Hood and the Western. And we all know the most basic trope of the Western. The mysterious stranger rides into town. He discovers a problem. He solves that problem, usually with a hail of bullets. And then he leaves town as mysterious as he arrived. This story has been told over and over again because it's so easy to reinterpret. Enter Sergio Leone and his masterpiece, the one that helped kick off the entire spaghetti western genre, A Fistful of Dollars. Old Sergio wanted to try his hand at reinterpreting the American Western. Sergio Leone had an agenda, though, and he wanted to do a Marxist deconstruction of the Western. In Leone's story, we have a town that's caught in the crossfire between two feuding families. These families control the government and the economics of the town. These two families represent the bourgeois, the wealthy elites in a capitalist system. Their world revolves around the never-ending quest to gain more power and money. They want money to gain power. Once they have power, they want to gain more money to go after more power. A never-ending cycle. The rest of the townsfolk represent the working class, the peasants, the people who are taken advantage of and abused by the bourgeois. As bad as the system might be, the town has reached an equilibrium. The two families aren't strong enough to take each other out. And at the same time, they need to maintain vigilance to make sure the peasants don't rise up and cast them off. Into this powder keg rides the man with no name. Within minutes of arriving in town, the man with no name disrupts the entire community, destroys the delicate balance between the two families when he kills a number of gunmen from one of the families. But he has also revealed his worth to the two families, because now that the balance of power has been broken, both families see an opportunity to eliminate their rival and become the undisputed ruler of the community. So they begin to vie for his services. And he sells his gun first to one family and then the other, systematically playing them off against each other for his own benefit. And by the end of the movie, he's the only one left standing. He has successfully destroyed both families. where he then rides off into the sunset, just as mysterious and enigmatic as when he first arrived. From the Marxist critique, the man with no name is the antagonist, the real villain of this story, because he represents the bourgeoisie, the middle class. He's abandoned the workers and wants to replace the bourgeois, the wealthy elites. And in his efforts to do that, he's abandoned all morality, has no honor and no integrity. He's willing to lie, cheat, steal, and betray, all in an effort to destroy the bourgeois. The man with no name's only friends in town, the hotel keeper and the coffin maker, they also represent the middle class. They aren't helping him out of any sense of kindness or friendship or loyalty. They're only motivated by personal benefits, by gain. They want to see the destruction of the two families, the destruction of the bourgeois. The title of the movie, Fistful of Dollars, represents the real complaint of the Marxist, and it's the worst insult a Marxist can hurl at somebody. They did it all for mere money. All that death and destruction, all that murder and killing was done just for a few dollars. The middle class was willing to completely destroy an entire system, an entire class of people, just for a couple dollars. Pocket change. For years, the American left embraced A Fistful of Dollars. They were particularly thrilled to see the movie being embraced by the American public, and in particular, by the very group the movie was critiquing, the American middle class. Yes, we're finally making headway. The American public are accepting Marxism. But to their shock and horror and later rage, they learned the American public, and in particular that middle class, weren't embracing A Fistful of Dollars because of its Marxist messaging. Oh, to the contrary. They had a very different interpretation. The 1960s was an incredibly turbulent time in American history. You could turn on the news almost on a nightly basis and see the authorities attacking fellow Americans using beatings, dogs, and hoses. You had high-profile political and social leaders assassinated, many of them under very dubious circumstances. You had a riot at the Democratic National Convention. Corruption was across the board. Government, corporations, education, the medical field. Crime was through the roof, worse in living memory. The police and prosecutors, they were more concerned with protecting the rich and powerful and crushing anybody who got in their way. They could care less about catching criminals. It's not like it was their problem to begin with. Sound familiar? When the American movie-going public went and saw A Fistful of Dollars, they interpreted the two feuding families as representing the government and social institutions, who had become corrupted and lost their way, no longer doing their original role of protecting the community. Instead, they had become tyrants, actively persecuting their fellow citizens. In rides the mysterious stranger, the man with no name. Who is he? Is he the personification of justice, retribution, vengeance? Is he a ghost? Or is he just some guy with a chip on his shoulder? We're never told. Clint Eastwood so fell in love with this ambiguity that he used it in a number of his later movies. What's more interesting from my perspective, the American movie-going public never saw the man with no name as a villain. They didn't even interpret him as an anti-hero, as in somebody who does the right thing for the wrong reasons. They saw him as a straight-up hero, acting in the finest traditions of any other Western story. The man with no name was just cool. And he was a badass. Those count for a lot. And the man with no name wasn't seen as immoral. He had a code, a very traditional American code that values self-reliance, independence, equality, and personal courage. All four traits the man with no name displayed in spades. The man with no name also displayed a very traditional American attitude when it comes to dealing with his enemies. Honorable enemies are entitled to honorable treatment. Dishonorable enemies, all bets are off. From the very first encounter, the two families never acted in good faith in their dealings with the man with no name. Therefore, he was justified in using whatever tactics he saw fit. In this case, using their own tactics back against them in his effort to defeat them. When it comes to the Marxist accusation that the man with no name just did it for the money, most Americans just didn't care. I mean, they're capitalists after all. But if your interpretation is that the man with no name is an agent of justice or divine retribution, getting paid just becomes another tactic he uses to accomplish his goal. The important takeaway of the movie was that the lone individual could tear down corrupt institutions. So what did it matter that he walked away with a fistful of dollars for his effort? There has been a battle of interpretations ever since the movie came out. The American left keeps insisting that their interpretation is the only legitimate one. Otherwise, you're not watching the movie right. You're not understanding what the author was trying to say. You're missing the point. Kinda sounds like an argument I've been hearing lately. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Their interpretation only holds up if you accept the Marxist premise. You reject that premise, and it's understandable that you would have a very different interpretation of the movie. Artists can pontificate. Critics can insist that their opinion should carry more weight. But at the end of the day, interpretations are a very personal thing. As far as A Fistful of Dollars goes, it's not the most original story. I mean, just ask Kurosawa. But the story is masterfully told. It's well worth watching, forming your own opinion, your own interpretation. If you've seen the movie, give me a comment. Let me know how you interpret it. But remember, interpretations are like assholes. Everyone has one, and they all stink but mine. At any rate, I hope I've given you all something to think about. Until next time, y'all be safe. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment.